Okay, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and thank you so much for joining us. It is Friday, July 31st, 2020, the last day of the IDRS first virtual symposium, and we're about to participate in a Q&A hosted by some wonderful colleagues from the Navy Band Great Lakes about their video presentation. Navy Band Great Lakes presents Adapting the Standard Woodwind Quintet. So with us today, we have Chief Musician Jeremy Saunders, saxophonist. We have Musician First Class Matthew Aiello, flutist. We have Musician Second Class Whitney Adams, oboist. And we have Musician Third Class Jason Paige, clarinetist. My name is Billy Short. I'm the bassoon at large member of the IDRS Executive Committee, and I'll be moderating this event. Now, you'll see that you can write in questions at any time using the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen. Just says Q&A. Please do so at any times. I'll be passing those along to our colleagues. And with that, I'd like to pass it along to our guests. So if everyone can maybe just go around, introduce yourselves, share a little bit about your background and how you sort of made your way to the Navy Band Great Lakes.
Hi everybody, I'm Musician First Class Matthew Aiello. I'm a flute player. Let's see, my background, I graduated from Manhattan School of Music and decided to join the Navy. I have a big history of service in my family, so it was really important for me to give back in that way. I've been to a few duty stations. I've been to Jacksonville, Florida, and Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. That was an awesome duty station. Hung out at the beach all the time. And now I'm here in Great Lakes playing with these guys, and it's been great.
Hi, I'm musician second class Whitney Adams. I am originally from Owasso, Oklahoma. I did my bachelor's at University of Arkansas in Fayetteville and master's at Arizona State. I joined the Navy Band in 2012, so I'm just about to hit my 8-year birthday. I have been stationed in Jacksonville, Florida, but not while Matt was there. And then our Naval Forces Europe Band, which is stationed in Naples, Italy, and I was there with Chief, and then now up here at Navy Band Great Lakes.
Jason, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. I'm musician third class Jason Paige. I'm the youngest of the bunch in terms of the Navy. I joined just over 2 years ago. My background, I'm a clarinetist. I'm also learning the saxophone while I'm in the Navy. And yeah, I did my undergraduate degree at Oklahoma City University. Then I went to Michigan State for my master's, and then I finished up with a doctorate of musical arts from University of Michigan in 2014. So I just joined the Navy a couple years ago, 2017 actually. And yeah, it's been a blast. This is my first band at Navy Band Great Lakes. And I'm probably going to be rotating to a new band here pretty shortly in the next few months or so.
Terrific.
Hi, I'm Chief Musician Jeremy Saunders. I studied music at App State University in North Carolina and did some freelance work before joining the United States Marine Band in Washington, D.C., where I spent 4 years. I left that job and did some traveling and touring with rock and roll bands before joining the Navy. I joined in 2007, and I've been stationed in Naples, Italy twice in the band there. And this is my second tour in Great Lakes. And then in between those, I spent about 4 years with the Navy Band Cruisers in Washington, D.C. So I'm really happy to be back in Great Lakes, and yeah, that's me.
So thank you for that, Chief Saunders. And I'm sorry, I have to hear more about leaving a military band touring with rock and roll bands coming back to the military. I just have to know more about that.
So I've always been a jack of all trades, and whenever I've gotten myself in a situation where I do one thing too much, I get bored. And that's specifically why I've left DC bands twice, is because being in the fleet, I get to play in woodwind quintet. I get to conduct a ceremonial band. I get to play in big band. I get to play rock and roll or jazz combo, concert music, and I haven't really enjoyed any other job in the military or really musical job in life as much as being in a fleet band, because I get to do all kinds of things and I don't get bored.
That's terrific. So everyone, I'm thinking that maybe it makes sense for us to sort of arrange this into two sections, where on the one hand we talk about sort of the specific subject matter of the video, the arranging portion, the incorporating the saxophone into the woodwind quintet, and then we can talk a little bit later more broadly about the job in sort of a general sense. And so if I can just share something that struck me as particularly interesting in your fantastic video. You know, it was fascinating to me how right off the bat you established that you don't just sort of pull the horn out of the quintet and just plug the saxophone into the hole that it left. That actually, you know, for example, in the William Grant Still, you sort of restacked and rearranged a number of different parts to make it work as well as possible. And I'm really curious to hear, you know, was this something that was just sort of immediately obvious that it would be necessary, or did it require some experimentation and some things that maybe didn't work first?
Yeah, so I think at the beginning we kind of plugged and play, and then we had the clarinet still playing the solo there at the beginning of Jesus is a Rock, and I think it was Jason's idea. He's like, hey, let's just stick that on a saxophone, and then we can have the bass clarinet play the low horn lines. Jason, you want to talk about that? Oh.
Yeah, so it's interesting what kind of drives the instrumentation, at least from my perspective as the arranger of that particular tune, because some of it was, okay, we have a saxophonist now instead of a horn, but we also, a lot of what we're doing is a part of a bigger whole. So we'll be taking this woodwind quintet on tour with a bigger group usually. And so a lot of what instruments were in the ensemble were dictated by what's available. I was already playing bass clarinet for the wind ensemble portion of our concerts. And I thought, okay, well, I'm already going to have the bass with me. Let's mix things around, because the alto saxophone is just as capable of playing the clarinet lines. And, you know, especially for that piece, you know, a lot of the jazzy kind of stuff that you can bring out of it. I think it worked really, really well. So yes, initially just plug and play just to see where we're at and see how much of a challenge it would be. And sometimes there were pieces where we ended up using or utilizing the tenor saxophone instead, just for that range capability, or making it so it's not so much of a strain on the alto saxophone. Yeah, so it was plug and play initially, and then fiddling around. And then of course, when you're arranging using Spalius or whatever, you can listen back and kind of see where things are going to be awkward or really work well.
Terrific. And it was also mentioned that the sort of more homogeneous quality of sound produced by the group with the saxophone sort of plugged into it didn't restrict the stylistic or expressive range of the quintet as a group, but it actually expanded it, which I found really fascinating. And, you know, my sort of initial knee-jerk reaction to that was, well, that doesn't quite make sense to me. And then I start thinking, and I'm like, well, you know, the string quartet is a pretty homogeneous group, but it has quite an expressive range. And so I'd love to just dig more deeply into that, and sort of what all of you just found in exploring this. Whitney, I noticed that you unmuted yourself. Would you like to take that question?
Sure, I can. Yeah, it was really interesting. There was one day where I had to come late to rehearsal because of something else, and so I walk in not knowing. Maybe it was like a month into the process, and I could have sworn that the bassoon was taking this line, and instead it was, the saxophone. And then there was another time just hearing it where I was like, oh, that's that, and not being in the room, just being like, that's who's playing. And it's just like, what? It was just really amazing to see how much we could fit into each other's sounds. I think I had told you I was a little bit of a woodwind quintet purist, but what are we going to do? Not have a group? Like, I want to play, so we need to play, so let's figure this out. And it just like blew my socks off. And our bassoonists both, we were just like, oh, it was just really fascinating. And it would change it just a little bit, but then still keep like the inherent quality, that the composer was initially going for. And then other times just get a quality you really weren't expecting, which was really wonderful to experience.
Yeah, I can totally see that, because just, having watched the video, I found myself during the sort of musical interludes often forgetting that the whole point of this presentation in many ways is to talk about incorporating the saxophone. It's not, it didn't stick out to me. It just sounded like a wind quintet with that really nice blend. Would anyone else like to speak to this? The sort of almost expand, please, Chief Saunders.
I would. First of all, I think something needs to be said of the saxophonist to whom they're referencing, who was part of this group initially, musician first class, David Drescher. He's at the School of Music now in Norfolk. I think he's just completed training on an advanced course. But Dave is an amazing saxophonist, and the range, the sensibility he has throughout the horn, and the ability to play in the very low register very quietly. And this isn't maybe always the best idea for a substitution, but when you have Dave on hand as an option, they're absolutely right. The tone colors he was able to affect while in the group, combined with the fact that Jason put so much time and effort into not just taking one part out, transposing it, and then handing it to another person and say, here we go. He really put time and effort into rearranging and making sure that that each chord and each melody and each texture made sense for the musicians and the instruments that were involved. Dave is a great human being and a great player. So I'm really lucky just to have the opportunity to step in this role and get to participate, as I have been able to, due to the hard work that really went before me.
That's fantastic. And just out of curiosity, Jason, did you sort of get into arranging kind of organically? Was it something that you had interest in or experience with prior to doing this work for the quintet?
Yeah. So when I was a civilian, I actually, one of my first musical jobs outside of the school, when I was at Michigan, was working for the Gershwin Initiative at University of Michigan. And so I wasn't arranging per se, but I was familiarizing myself with that type of software. And I started to get into arranging specifically for clarinet ensembles, just seeing like, oh, what works for this? Can I put string quartet stuff on a bunch of clarinets and not have it sound awful? And so I did have a little bit of arranging background, but not a ton. And then I did start getting more into arranging after I joined the Navy. And I noticed that further into the program, there are opportunities to arrange for wind ensemble or jazz ensemble or anything. And so I hope to be doing more of that as we go on. The other thing that steps into my mind about this is I was in a contemporary sextet that had clarinet, saxophone, and strings, piano, and percussion. And so I remembered that, you know, if you have a really high quality saxophonist, it's super easy to incorporate them into a non-standard role. And saxophone blends so well with strings and reed instruments. So it was a perfect fit.
Terrific. If anyone has any additional questions about the arranging portion, please do plug them into the Q&A section before we move on to talking sort of more broadly about the job of being a Navy musician. In the meantime, I have one more question, just sort of generally to the group. I'm just curious, sort of, in your experience, what adjustments sort of have to be made by the saxophonists themselves in order to really incorporate well into the quintet? You know, what challenges did it present? And on the other hand, was there anything that sort of plugged in more easily than expected?
I can start. Yeah, we found, much like the horn, it's very similar to the horn, right? Because the horn is a louder instrument generally than any of the reed instruments or the flute. So just like the horn, be mindful of the dynamics, be mindful of overpowering the group. Yeah.
Yeah, and at the same time, it was finding that balance where, you know, not backing off so much, and you know, the first few weeks of playing around was, you know, kind of swinging the pendulum one way or the other, and then finding that real sweet spot. And it's hard for me to say specifically what ranges, but you know, our bassoonist said that some of the ranges were very similar to working with a horn, but then there would just be others through trial and error where it was like, oh, this is much easier to blend with you in this range. Oh, this is a little bit more difficult than horn to blend with you in that one. Yeah, it was a lot of playing around.
I even remember telling
Please. No, please.
I even remember telling or asking our saxophone player Dave at the time, I'm not chief, to play out more, because I was in my altissimo range. You can hear the flute when I'm super high. Oboe tends to stick out and right in their comfortable mid range anyway, you know, and he was playing too quiet, right? We needed to hear him.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Chief Saunders, it strikes me that, you know, within the band, I think I'm remembering correctly that you play with the horn and blend with the horn a lot. Do you think that's relevant to, you know, the issue of actually replacing the horn in an ensemble like this, or do you think that it just presents totally different challenges?
I think it's useful. Really, I think the benefit the saxophonists have is that the coming up through wind ensemble, I mean, Whitney and I now in 2 bands, we have played solos and duets together that we have in and out of concert band music, and you're paired with the clarinets. French horns, you know, starting in middle school, and it was the bane of our existence then. It was like, sound more like the French horn, sound, you know, because in beginner saxophones, you get this very reedy nasal sound sometimes that the band director is trying to stop at all costs. But because of those efforts early on to sort of open up and play with an open sound, then more of what you're concerned with is what they were just talking about. In different ranges of the saxophone, the tone does change. Maybe not to the extent that the throat tones in the middle of clarinet change the timbre, but you know, when you've got isolated left hand notes, they can be much more reedy and sort of openly resonant, as opposed to if you've got more of the horn closed, then it does become to resonate, begin to resonate more like a French horn. And those are easily more characteristic of the sound that you're hoping to emulate.
That's great. Thank you. We have a few questions and comments that have come in. First of all, from Lieutenant Patrick Hill, the director, of Navy Band Great Lakes, would like to let everyone know that, let me see, it is musician 3rd class Paige has been selected for promotion to musician second class. Congratulations to him. We will get the correct ranking him on Monday. So
Thank you.
congratulations to you.
Yay.
And thank you, Lieutenant Hill,
Thanks, sir.
for making sure that gets said. We have a question. Have you considered a saxophone other than E flat alto? And am I remembering correctly that you do use tenor at some points?
That is correct. There were during our tour last year with Dave, we had, I believe, 2 or 3 pieces that called for tenor. It sat better on tenor for those particular pieces. I believe one of the William Grant Still miniatures we did on tenor, and then but we tried to avoid him having to lug around a Barry and a soprano as well. So that's when the bass clarinet came in handy.
I think Peter and the Wolf was tenor.
Peter and the Wolf had some tenor.
Peter and the Wolf was tenor.
It was also A and B flat clarinet for that one as well.
Got it. And Marcia Schweitzer asks, have you considered a totally reed quintet, perhaps replacing the flute with E flat clarinet? No offense to the flute, I love you too.
Well, what's interesting is a lot of the times, a lot of what dictates what ensemble we can put together is who we have in the band. And this band, at the time, we only had 2 clarinet players. So we didn't want to drag her away from playing in something else or working on something else.
Terrific.
But
so
we do.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry. But we do, keep a catalog of trios and quartets and things, and definitely pull those out as the tour that we're on, or the just what's coming up as that applies. So
I definitely think that group would sound fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think Marcia, I think you have experience with that group, if I remember. But we're working, like these guys said, we work with what we've got a lot of the time, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Chief Saunders, did you want to chime in also?
Yeah, it's sort of the necessity is the mother of invention, because you can look around the fleet at different points in time, and we all have life happen to us sometimes. So whether it's somebody gets sick, or they have an injury, or they're on maternity leave, or they need to go and do another, some other function for the Navy, or maybe they're in another unit, then you see the opportunity to create something that hasn't existed before. It takes effort, but then you get to own it and experience something in a different way. Yeah. And instead of looking at like handcuffed, it sort of frees you to reimagine things in a creative way.
Terrific. Thank you all. So if we now just transition into talking about the job of being a Navy musician in a more broad sense, we have a question from Michael DiPietro. Do you sometimes perform at sea? What are the interesting challenges of the job, above and beyond the usual reed issues?
Sure. So we do, double reeds do go on deployment with our Naples band, our band in Europe, and our band in Hawaii. I missed out on that deployment for different reasons, so I can't speak to the deployment part, but Matt went on a Pacific partnership with double reeds, if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, so I'll clear something up real quick. When we go on deployment, we're musicians. We're never part of the ship crew or anything. We're always there as performers. So we'll go on humanitarian missions to kind of, we're practicing when the ship's underway at sea, and then when we get on shore, we'll go out and we'll play gigs at schools, and we'll play gigs, for local communities and stuff like that. As far as the challenges went, I was on a Pacific Partnership in 2015. We had an oboe and 2 bassoons in our group at that on that trip, and they used a lot of the. Forgive me, I don't know any brand names or anything like that for oboes and bassoons, but they used a lot of the composite equipment and the plastic reeds, because we had to worry about the humidity. The humidity and the heat is intense out there, and they were worried, that wooden instruments wouldn't fare well out there. But they still sounded great. Ideally, obviously, we would want to use the professional instruments, but they were pros, and they still got those instruments to sound great.
And I will say with the advance in the quality of the composite instruments, and then specifically the Leger reeds, our bassoonist in Italy, we were there just after they finally got the bassoon reed really great, Leger, and so we'd never been able to take a double reed to Africa because it was just so difficult. And she was able. It was an event where we flew in and flew back out, and she was able to go on that trip because the Leger reed provided her that, like, okay, I'm gonna have something stable to play on if I can't make a wood reed happen, a cane reed happen. So those
terrific. And I'm curious to hear from any and all of you. What has been most surprising or unexpected to you about being a Navy musician? Chief Saunders, I see you.
Yeah,
I see you unmuting yourself.
What's beautiful about this is that there's always the standard of what you're going to do. One of our number one priority is to support ceremonial functions of the Navy. So for us, we get to, and each band has its own unique mission based on their geographical area or the realities of the Navy, wherever that band is. For us, that's, boot camp is where we are. So we get to play that graduation ceremony every Friday. We get to see the newest sailors in the Navy, every single week they come through. And then after that, they're on their way to training for their specific jobs that they're going to have. But besides that ceremonial part, we're musicians that have dedicated our lives to it, and we can do different things. And as you can, hear Jason talk about the sextet he was in, the different ensembles and educational experiences we had coming in, you get to put your skills to use in ways that you wouldn't have thought that you were going to when you play the little audition to get into the Navy. I play a little bit of guitar, and I didn't advertise it, but about 2.5 months into my Navy time, they said, our pianist is having carpal tunnel problems and we don't have another rhythm player to go on tour. So I said, well, I play a little rhythm guitar. And a month later, I was in Tanzania and Mozambique and South Africa, riding a boat and playing for schools and orphanages and public concerts all over Africa. It was amazing. But that surprise of anything that you have to give, it's going to get used and probably in really fulfilling and rewarding, surprising ways.
Yeah, and I would say the most surprising was, we talk about, I said in the video, that music is a huge unifier, and it's this universal language. And I knew that before I joined the military, but we live that, especially when we're in an overseas band. I mean, that's, you live that, where it's like, I can barely talk to you, but we're like sharing this really great musical connection in a joint ensemble, or we're playing a song, a local folk song, and so you're just so moved by it. Or I look like your daughter who's on deployment, and so you're hugging me real tight after a 4th of July concert. So those have been my favorite parts.
Yeah, I'll echo the impact to veterans playing the patriotic songs, and especially the service songs. When you see one of those old World War II guys stand up for the Navy song and salute, it brings a tear to your eye, and it's very meaningful, very impactful.
Terrific. And I mean, that sort of provides a natural segue into just broadly talking about, what's the job like, from the standpoint of comparing to a civilian gig, or, even one of the DC military bands. We've touched on sort of the variety, the necessity being the mother of invention aspects, but I'd love to hear more about, just what makes sort of a position like the one that you all occupy unique.
Sure. Well, the similarities in it are that, we all have the pieces that we've played 100 times and we can play with our eyes closed. But rather than that be Nutcracker or Magic Flute or Beethoven, for us, it's the anthem and Stars and Stripe and the whole suite for bands and 5 Easy Dances. And then, a tux and concert black as a uniform. And so we just wear a different uniform. So a lot of that, a lot of the groundwork is really similar. But I think the uniqueness is the wide range of opportunity. And if I wanted to branch out into out of a real classical mindset, in school or freelancing, I would be a lot of work. I would have to really work my network to find a good jazz mentor, or find, that would be a lot of work, where it's built in every single time. Chief is a wonderful, phenomenal classical saxophonist, and he's a wonderful, phenomenal jazz saxophonist. And that's everywhere, where it's like, oh, you're so good at big band, you're so good at blues. You're so good at arranging. If I want to learn those things, those mentors are really easily accessible, which I love.
And then outside of the opportunities as a musician, one thing we sort of touched on just briefly is that you can bring all these other skills to the Fleet program. And that's one of the big differences between Navy musicians in the Fleet versus Navy musicians in Washington, D.C., is that we all have our own collateral duties. We all have these things that we do day to day that help keep the band running. For example, I'm one of the public affairs officers, and I do photography and graphic design and all those things. And I also put together that video that we had before this. And but those are skills that I really enjoyed as a civilian, but never really thought that I would have the opportunity to utilize as a musician. And the Fleet has really brought that out in a lot of people. It really allows you to shine on things that you might have just considered a hobby before.
Terrific. And unfortunately, we do need to start wrapping things up, just mainly so that our fantastic tech support, Joshua, who's been working unbelievably hard this week, has at least 5 minutes to breathe. But just really quickly, Whitney, something that you mentioned kind of in passing that I find amazing is that you're still able to hold auditions during the current pandemic. Can you just briefly tell us, how that's even possible?
Well, so they are currently taking initial packets for French horn. There's a packet due on August 7th for French horn. And so they have been figuring that out. And we'll see how it goes sort of from time to time. But as with the rest of the military, we cannot shut down our our training pipeline is what we call it. And so we have to still keep recruiting. People are still getting out, so we have to still bring people in. So we're still able to do that. Everything is slowed. It's probably at a slower pace than it is when we're not in lockdown. Certainly, they do intend to hire again for oboe and bassoon within the year. They usually hire for each instrument at least once a year. And so you can contact Navy Music Auditions info@navy.mil if you would like to get on an alert list, and then you'll find out about the audition before it goes public. And so that they can help with that.
Terrific. Well, thank you all so much for being with us today, for sharing your time and your insights and your expertise and your experiences with all of us. This has been fascinating and enriching, and I hope you stay safe and healthy and continue arranging for really interesting groups.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Billy, and
too.
thank you to IDRS for the opportunity to.
Very much.
Many
Thank you.
thanks.
It's been a great week. Bye.
Bye.